Welcome back to another episode of Grinding Iron and Flour. Today we are going to be buttoning up the Bricknose. So I got some shocks picked up for the front end. This is an aftermarket cooler for my power steering. I have a new power steering pump and some ATF Type F for the power steering pump. So go ahead, I'm going to do the power steering pump first. I got back to the house and I checked out the shocks and they're actually the wrong size. So I have to take those back tomorrow, get them exchanged for the right size, and it'll be good to go. So the first thing I did is went ahead and took off this air dam. It basically goes between my radiator support and the front bumper. And this is going to allow me to get access to the bolts back there that hold my front bumper on. So it's not necessary to take the front bumper off for what I'm doing, but it will make it a lot easier for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it off. I also have to take measurements for a special project that requires me to take the front bumper off. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead, pull the front bumper off, and then I can pull the grill out, and that's basically just gonna give me access, as much access as possible, to the radiator. So I went ahead and got it all torn apart. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it right here in front of my AC condenser. Just looks like the most easiest spot to get to. I'm probably gonna push it up right behind my grill in this piece, so then I have a straight shot to this hole right here to run my lines, so they can just go in straight over to the power steering pump. Looking at the directions, it's kind of interesting. They show you the efficiency level based on where you mount it. So I'm gonna go look over these really quickly, make sure I'm doing everything right, and then I'll get back to you. All right, so I did end up taking the grill off, which didn't work well. This is the original grill from this truck, and it's never been taken off. So every single one of my clips broke except for one. So that's pretty cool. Really excited to have a super loose fitting grill. Anyways, here's the cooler. The way it works is you have these zip tie kind of things, and you're gonna push those through, and then there's these foam pads that go in the middle of them, and that's just to space this away from your AC condenser or your radiator or your oil cooler or whatever you put it on. So I'm gonna go ahead and just push this through my AC condenser, and then they have these little clips which go on the back side, and it tightens down like a zip tie. Alright, so to drain my power steering pump, I'm just going to cut the whole old cooler out. But I'm going to cut it down here more because I still need to reuse some of this line to route it into my new cooler. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I got a drain pan on the ground to catch all the power steering fluid that comes out. So I got that line cut. Everything is draining out of the other line. It looks like nothing came out of that, or a few dribbles did, but this one's draining pretty good. So it's nice, there's already a hose there. So I'm just gonna cut the clamp that's on it, pull that tube out. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this other hard line out, just because, as you can see, we got a light. As you can see, it's that upper hard line right there, and it goes down, but I want it to come out of this hole back here. So I have to bend that so that it comes to the front of the truck, so then I can adapt it to my soft line to go into my new cooler. The other line I'm gonna pull off of the power steering pump and see what it looks like. If it's a hard line like this one, I might just cut the hard line and do the same thing. This is a high pressure side, so that's why it has that fancy crimp on there, because that's high pressure. The other side, everything that goes in the oil cooler is low pressure, so we don't have to worry about high pressure fluid. All right, so I cut that fitting off short, so it's just gonna go up and over, and then I flared the end because I was looking at these other ones and they're all flared. So I think this one's flared because you can use this either way, but I know that by flaring it, when I put the soft line on there, it'll have a harder time of slipping off, especially with a hose clamp. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this on, and then I can throw on my bottom side for the oil cooler. Boy, oh boy, those fins got a little battered putting those on, but those two lines are on. These are a super tight fit, which is good. I could probably get away with not running hose clamps on there, but it's better safe than sorry. So I got both those lines ran through the hole, and then I got my bottom line going into my steering box down there, and then this top line is going to go into my power steering pump on the return side. So I gotta go ahead and pull the pump, and then I can get that other line pulled off and figure out exactly what I'm gonna do to route it. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled the belt. To do that, you pull this tensioner right here up. It'll put slack in the belt. You pop it off a pulley, and then you can take the whole thing off. Then after that, I pulled there's 4 bolts in the water pump. That is to hold the fan on and this water pump pulley. If you take those 4 bolts out, your fan will come loose, and then you can pull your fan shroud and your fan out in one piece. So I went ahead and did that, and then I pulled the pulley off my power steering pump, and that exposes these 3 bolts here, 2 on top, 1 on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and pull those 3 bolts out, which will release my power steering pump out the back, and then from there I'll go ahead, disconnect my lines, and get the new one swapped in. Alright, I got the old power steering pump out. I had always had a power steering leak, and I actually found it. It was on this port. That line was super loose. So, and this is the high pressure side, so it was shooting power steering fluid out of this fitting. So I'm gonna have to get a new hose tomorrow, but for the time being, I can go ahead and get my power steering pump thrown in. So I have my return line here. I checked where I want it. It's gonna go like that. So I went ahead and cut the end off, cut it to length. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on that port with a hose clamp, and then get everything reinstalled. So the new power steering pump is in, bolts are tightened down, and then I went ahead and pressed that pulley back on. Now I gotta install the final hose, and then I gotta fill it up. They leave these, basically prevents dust from getting in them, so I'm gonna leave that in there until I'm ready to fill it up. And then make sure you keep your old cap, because they don't come with caps. Alright, so I got my pump put all back together, got the pulley, sorry, the serpentine belt put on, got the fan put back on, fan shroud put on. I went ahead and put my grill back on. I'm gonna go ahead and run it. So I'm gonna take the cap off and run it, and that'll help bleed the system. And then I'm gonna look for leaks while I'm doing that. And we'll see what happens. So I read it, and it said if it's foaming like that, it's because there's still air in the system. So I'm just running it here, and I'm turning my wheel back and forth and getting it all bled out. So just keep doing that until you don't have any more foam in your power steering. So I just got my power steering pump bled. I'm gonna go ahead, put the air intake back in, make sure everything's all buttoned up and good to go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and clearance my motor cross member some more. All right, so now that I got that cooler out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this right here all the way over, and then continue cutting it like that, just to get more clearance for my panhard bar. And then I have to cut it back there as well where it's been contacting the diff, so I'm not gonna be cutting that mount out. Okay, so I went ahead and cut that one out, and I cut that mount out. So now we should have plenty of room. You can maybe see it. There's basically a spot in my paint up here where you could see that mount was hitting it. And if you look at the mount, it's kind of hot, but on this end over here, it was mushroomed. So you could tell when I went over a big bump, I could feel it. So I knew something was hitting, and that was it. So I cut it out. Now, eventually I'll go and hit this with an angle grinder and smooth it all out, and probably get some flat strap and weld it in just so it looks, you know, that's how it's supposed to be. But for now, this is just how we're gonna do it. So there it is. Everything's cut out and clearance. We should have no issues with anything hitting now. So they didn't have the right shocks. I ended up ordering them. So I got some nice Philistines for the front. These hoses are supposed to go around the shock, but with the James Duff arms moving the shocks back, they don't fit. So I threw them in front to prevent from binding. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw a piece of tubing right here. Either I'll try to move this one back, or I'll just cut a new one and put it on there to help with that rub spot. I did put the shocks in on the factory mounts. I've heard some guys that'll move them to the top of the radius arm. Doesn't look like our shock angle is that bad. We're probably around that 10-degree mark, which we're gonna lose a little bit of efficiency, so they're not gonna dampen as well, but it's probably not gonna be a noticeable amount. So we're good to go with that. I'm gonna go ahead and get this one bolted in all the way, tightened up. And then I went ahead on the front axle here. I had a grade 5 bolt on this joint, so I swapped that out for a grade 8 with a locking nut. I had just a mock-up bolt on my panhard bar on the axle side, so I went ahead and put a longer bolt in there with a locking nut. I didn't have a locking nut on my pitman arm, so I went ahead and got a locking nut and threw it on there. That was just kind of all the hardware I had was just for mock-up. It's what they had at the local hardware store, so I didn't have to run into town. But once I got everything done, I took a list and went and bought all my stuff. So I started getting my locker put in. So as you can see here, I have the plug on the diff housing, and then I just zip tied that to my brake soft line to go all the way up, so we don't have any issues with it getting stretched too much and binding. I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of electrical tape over that plug and the wiring to the end of the harness. And then I also ended up buying an Auxbeam switch panel. We got this Auxbeam panel here. I'm gonna go ahead and mount that inside the cab. That way, these Bricknose trucks, don't have a whole lot of room to mount things. Like, you can mount things in the dash right there, but that's kind of weird looking. The side here is another spot I've heard. Underneath, but there's not a whole lot of room to mount things. So I got that Auxbeam because there's, I believe, 6 on that one, 6 positions. So I'll probably end up mounting it right here or underneath, and that way I can run my front locker off it, any lights I want to put on it, and then if I have anything else, I might run my winch to a solenoid, and then that solenoid will be triggered by the Auxbeam panel. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead, get both shocks put in, then I'll finish wiring up the locker. All right, so I went ahead and I pulled apart my front end, pulled all the heim joints off, and I put anti-seize on all of these threads where it goes into my tubes, just so those don't seize up on me down the road. I got both my shocks put in, so those work great. And then I didn't film any of this, but I got this Auxbeam 6-position, or I guess 6-spot switch, and I mounted it right down here, and I ran that through to my engine bay. These are pretty neat. That's backlit, and it comes with stickers for everything. I haven't finished setting it up yet. I just need to throw the stickers on. But I mounted the fuse block right here. Take that cap off, and then there's all your fuses in there. And then it's all numbered to match what's in the cab. So if I need to add stuff, all I have is the signal switch for my e-locker. So I went and had, this is all hooked up and good to go. I went ahead and wired the e-locker in. So the front e-locker is good to go. That's right here. I ran into some issues with the e-locker and it wasn't engaging. So I was troubleshooting it and I ended up having power to the plug, but power wasn't getting through the plug. So what actually ended up happening was those pins weren't pushed far enough through the plug, so they weren't contacting the other end. It looked like they were all the way in, but they weren't. So I had to take it apart multiple different times. It was actually kind of a pain in the butt getting those set. But just take your time and make sure that you see those prongs sticking out of the diff side plug a good ways, or else you're gonna run into the same issues as me. So went ahead, that's all good. Tested the e-locker, it works, so we're good to go. I also removed the smog pump to make room for that fuse block. So we've got a few more things to do, but we're good. So thanks for watching.